keeping on the Ukraine subject, there were some major developments across the Atlantic. We're going to start with the most important one from our allies over at the UK, making a very, very big announcement. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Originally reported in an interview with The Telegraph, they say that British troops could be sent to Ukraine as the country ramps up on, quote, on-the-ground training efforts. So this was made by the U.S. Secretary of State for Defense, the UK Secretary of Defense, Grant Shapps. In an interview with The Telegraph, he said he aims to get his military, quote, closer and actually into the country. This is the first and would be the first major great power to actually send troops directly on the ground inside of Ukraine. They allege it's for training. Okay, I've heard that one before, in Syria. The point, though, is that this would be a big demarcation point, I think, for NATO, especially for the second largest military in the alliance, to actually send troops there on the ground. It also comes at a time of a new report from Germany, who really can't make up its mind with the Ukraine conflict. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. Just so everyone's wondering, this is not Russian Pravda. This is from Ukrainian Pravda. However, they do report it accurately. German official says that Ukraine has the right to launch missiles on Russian territory. This is the chair of the Defense Committee in the German Bundestag, and is urging the German government to continue giving these long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine, that she believes that Ukraine has the right to attack targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. All of this being met with some fury inside of Moscow and some frankly terrifying rhetoric. Regardless of whether it hasn't come true in the past, you never know when it will. Let's put this up there from Dmitry Medvedev, of course, the former president of Russia. He says, quote, that the number of idiots in power in NATO countries is growing. One newly minted blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip his propaganda. To turn the British military instructors into our armed forces legal targets while being fully aware they will be ruthlessly eliminated. This time not as mercenaries, but as British NATO specialists. He again name checks this Bundestag chairwoman, and he said she is clamoring to provide these with Taurus missiles to enable the Kiev regime to hit deep into Russian territory. This will be in accordance with international law. In the case, the strikes against the German plants which produce these missiles will also fully correspond to international law. Quote, these half-wits are actively pushing us to World War III. Now, listen, he said a lot of different things in the past, and many of them haven't come true. He's been one of the chief nuclear saber rattlers. So I want to be very clear that a lot of his rhetoric has been empty in the past. However, it only has to not be empty once, and everything is completely has gone off the cliff, Krystal. And so this is a real fight, with the Atlantic. And what's really happening is that as U.S. support for Ukraine diminishes, the Euros have to make a choice. They're like, okay, are we going to ramp up, or are we going to just say, let's go for diplomacy, let's try and move this in a different direction? I think this is probably the last-ditch effort on the pass of the great Atlantic powers to try and at least ramp up the conflict or show that they're able to. But from a sheer dollar perspective, and even put dollars aside, equipment, they have no chance of backfilling even 25% of what the United States has been able to provide Ukraine, because we are the largest and greatest military power on earth, with even with all of our problems of capacity, of which we have highlighted here, which do harm us in terms of sending to Ukraine. Even with all of that, it is still many orders of magnitude larger than what these militaries are. So I saw this as a pretty major development in the conflict, and especially because it's the nightmare scenario, just like what we used to deal with in Syria. And I used to think about it all the time. I'm like, we've got 2,000 guys on the ground in Syria. All it takes is one Russian plane to kill one of these guys, and we're in a whole other situation. You don't know. And there were all these moments in Syria where our deconfliction line wasn't working with the Russians. We got very lucky that nobody was actually, or as far as we know, was not killed by a Russian strike, or vice versa. But things got real close. Don't forget whenever Turkey shot down a Russian jet with a NATO aircraft firing on a Russian jet. I mean, things got very hairy there for a 24, 48-hour period before things were allowed to de-escalate. And you're only one bad move away from a very, very significant event that something like this happens.
Absolutely. Which is why the one line that the U.S. has consistently said, okay, no boots on the ground.
Well, for what we know. But
right,
yes, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's been the one piece where they're like, all right, that's going to be a bridge too far. But now we've got British NATO folks on the ground in Ukraine. I mean, now even that line is getting pushed and really actively crossed with potentially really catastrophic consequences. I mean, this is a very, very dangerous escalation that clearly the Russians see it as such as well. And it's not just that. Shapps also said that British defense companies like BAE Systems, they're going to move manufacturing into the country, and they're floating the idea of the British Navy helping Ukraine in the Black Sea.
That would be madness.
So continuing to push further and further up the chain of escalation. And listen, I mean, Medvedev has been full of shit, and this, oh, they might push us into World War III. All right, Russia has total agency in this situation as well, so don't give me this nonsense. But there is no doubt about the fact that every step we go up this ladder becomes more and more dangerous. And now we're also, Germany floating these long-range missiles as well, and actively being fine with them striking Russian soil. If we had jumped to this place early on in the conflict, I think that Americans and a lot of the global community would be like, whoa, this is way too far. But because they did it so slowly, step by step by step by step, there isn't nearly the coverage, nearly the freak out around these sorts of actions that there should be.
I know. And, look, everybody, we took a lot of heat here, Krystal, in the early days warning about this. And I didn't care when 90% of the public was like, I support this, because I've seen this story so many times. You only have to be, I'm only 31 and I've seen multiple conflicts where this starts. First, we're in Afghanistan for what? Oh, we're going to get bin Laden. Then we're like, oh, well, we lost bin Laden. So now what? Well, now we got to defeat the Taliban. It's like, wait, why? For what reason? Well, so he can't come back. Okay. But then that turns into democracy promotion. And then that turns into, we got to defend the new democracy from the Taliban. And the next thing you know, they're for 20 years. And you're building wells and you're building girls' schools, and that's the entire mission that you're there for. And you're like, well, why were we there in the first place? The original thing that we said is like, no boots on the ground, no escalation. We're going to help Ukraine defend its sovereign territory. Then it was like, well, which sovereign territory? Pre-existing, February 22nd borders, past borders. And then really what I believe the most irresponsible move that we made from day one is we mortgaged the whole conflict and gave it to Zelensky. And we said, no, you're in charge.
Right.
When here's the truth. This man, he would be dead if it was not for the US and for NATO. And I don't say this with disrespect. It's just a matter. You go ask them. Ask people in Kyiv, would you be alive right now and under Ukrainian sovereignty if it weren't for the United States and NATO? Obviously not. So if that's true, then you're not the one who's in the driver's seat. Sure, it's great. Yes, it's brave and it's valiant that you're the ones who are doing the fighting and the dying. But we are the ones who are doing all of the bankrolling. And I think we're all probably about to find out real soon how much they really are reliant on US aid if the rug gets pulled. We'll see very quickly their ability to actually have any semblance of command and control without us. And I think that is probably somewhere near zero.
Yeah. Which
points, again, to our driver's seat, our choices. And I think what you said was very smart about how if you keep it 2 years on and drag it and, timeline and in headlines too, where he's like considering it. It's like, he's not considering it. He's going to do it. This is a trial.
If they're floating it,
right.
It's happening. It probably is already happening.
Exactly. It's probably happened for the last year. They're just now acknowledging it. We don't know.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah. And I think this all comes in the context too, frankly, some desperation from the NATO alliance, because they can read the writing on the wall of the way the politics are shifting here, most critically, but also, throughout Europe. And we're about to, cover a story that I think underscores that. I don't know what the sentiment is with the British public. They've always been very hawkish. I don't know if there's any slippage there as well. But there's clearly a sense of, okay, I'm not sure how long our populations are going to continue to support this direction. So I guess we got to pull on all the stops and actually kind of sort of put boots on the ground. And I guess we got to go ahead with those long-range missiles, because we're getting a little desperate to make some progress here so that we can continue to prove to our populations that Ukraine has any sort of a shot in this war.
That's well said. And, look, data speaks for itself. Russia took more territory in August, which was the flagship month of the offensive, than Ukraine did. Okay? Go look at a map. We can go over it again if you really want to.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.